Welcome to PandaAudioBooks, the perfect place for a huge collection of fantasy novels. If you enjoy my content and want to support my work, a small contribution via PayPal is greatly appreciated. And don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and hit the notifications bell to stay updated with our latest audiobook chapters. Chapter 771, Battle at the Border, 5. The cultivator's layer of rainbow light was clearly specialized in blocking spirit techniques. Under such heavy attacks, the light barrier wasn't shaken in the slightest. Long Han rejoiced at the sight. The 1,000 of cultivators that had activated the formation were elite disciples from the 9 Nations Union. From how skillfully they placed down their spell formation, it appears that Wei Wuya's description of them wasn't exaggerated. Seeing that the attack had no effect, the shriveled old man's expression grew unsightly, but he immediately ordered another wave of attacks regardless. The next series of incantations from the spell warrior army didn't form simple fireballs and icicles. Rather, fire crows and translucent ice pythons began to take form in the sky. Of course, due to its increased complexity, the attack took longer to channel. At that moment, a series of disturbances occurred in the cultivator army, and a division of green-robed cultivators flew out from barrier. They raised spirit beast pouch from their waist and released several tens of different demon beasts in a burst of rainbow light. The 3 in the lead appeared particularly uncommon. There was a rarely seen dragon horse, with a horn on its head and scales that twinkled with white light on its body, a 2-headed demon lion, with a fishy scent and green fur, and the most fearsome of them all, a 15-meter-long venomous scorpion, with a crimson shell and a pitch-black stinger. These demon beasts were the most vicious and meticulously nurtured spirit beasts of the controlling spirit sect. Immediately after they were released, they led an overbearing charge against the huge beasts and transformed spirit beasts. For a time, the beasts fought together in a chaotic battle. Although only the 3 main spirit beasts could stand against one of the huge beasts alone, they had numbers on their side. They were well trained. Together, they were able to block the huge beast's advance and even gained the upper hand in battle. At the same time that the demon beasts were released, several thousands cultivators took to the skies. As they flew, these 5 cultivators' divisions each wielded their various magic tools and rained down attacks upon the spell warrior army. The current wave of spirit techniques that the spell warriors were casting were far more vicious than the others. As such, the cultivators wouldn't calmly wait for the spell warriors to finish, and they continuously sent waves of magic tool attacks and raging waves, wearing down the Mulan defensive spell formation. The shriveled old man's expression sank and he coldly snorted before giving the order for a large number of spell warriors to fly to the skies and engage the cultivators in battle. A fierce exchange of spirit techniques, magic tools, and treasures erupted through the sky. In the confrontation, several hundreds of defensive magic tools ruptured upon receiving enemy attacks and their owns fell from the skies, making for a desperate sight. But in that moment of delay, the spell warrior army had already finished preparations for their next spell technique barrage. Several tens of fire crows and ice pythons charged towards the cultivator armies as if they were alive. Likewise, in the time the Mulan were casting their spell techniques, the cultivators had also prepared defenses. Before the attacks could land, countless magic treasures and tools flew into the air and struck down a majority of the flame crows and ice pythons. As for those who made it through, they were completely blocked by the rainbow light barrier, causing no lasting damage, only a few sways. Long Han frowned when he saw this. It seemed the 9 Nations Union's defensive spell formation was incapable of completely blocking more powerful spell techniques. After breathing out a long sigh, he gave the order for the cultivator army to slowly advance towards the spell warriors under the protection of the rainbow barrier. At that same moment, many cultivators began taking out their magic tools and treasures, using them to protect themselves. Soon, various incantations followed, and the magic tools and treasure began to brightly shine as if being readied for an attack. The shriveled old man's eyes coldly glinted. He knew that the cultivators risked taking the initiative to approach to interrupt the casting for another spirit technique barrage, and they were successful. With these new developments, he gave the order for the spell warrior army to leave their defensive barrier and slowly march forward. The distance between both sides quickly drew closer. When the armies were only 300 meters away from each other, they could faintly see their enemies' faces. 7 white jade talismans took the initiative to leave the ranks of the cultivators, each talisman sent out by 7 solemn old men from the Phoenix Cry sect. Just as the jade talismans were released, they shot towards the ranks of the spell warriors in streaks of white light, and revolved about 100 meters above them before revealing their true form. They contracted and swelled before releasing sky-shaking claps of thunder. Each of the 7 talismans shattered and turned into balls of dazzling white lightning. As they floated in place, they suddenly grew in size, expanding to miniature suns the size of 30 meters in length in the blink of an eye. Many of the spell warriors couldn't help but look above, dumbstruck at the sight of them. Not good. It's an ancient talisman. The shriveled old man lost his composure at the sight of this and turned pale with fright. Before he could react, the 7 blazing suns exploded in succession. Scorching arcs of electricity surged instantly above the spell warriors, covering them in 7 huge arcs of electricity. The others seemed to have taken this as a sign for actions. Countless flashes of various colored light filled the sky as they tossed their own talismans into the fray. At that moment, a muffled thunder clapped from within the white light. "It seems quite lively on the outside," Han Li muttered to himself. At that moment, he was staring at the crimson barrier in front of him with complete tranquility. Ever since he realized that the Mulan planned to trap them, Han Li's worries had disappeared without a trace. The Mulan might be completely confident in this barrier, but likewise, Han Li was confident in his ability to dispel restrictions. However, he had to be careful deciding when he would emerge. Although Han Li might be willing to lend his strength to resist the Mulan invasion, he also didn't wish to become cannon fodder and die a worthless death in the middle of a chaotic battle. After all, this was a war between armies of cultivators, not a battle against single cultivators. If he was spotted by several nascent soul stage cultivators as soon as he appeared or was met with the simultaneous attack of hundreds of spell warriors, it would prove very dangerous even with his lightning movement. It would only be safer to emerge once the melee starts between both armies, when a majority of high-grade cultivators were fighting each other. Of course, even if the blood barrier hadn't appeared, Han Li would have had other methods of disappearing during the most dangerous parts of the battle. Able to feel the thunderous vibrations through the barrier, Han Li felt that it was a sign that the melee was about to start. While he didn't know what caused such an astonishing attack, he knew that it was certain to be devastating to the side that received it. With that thought, Han Li sighed and he shook his head before examining the other areas of the blood barrier. The blood barrier was truly weird. His spiritual sense wasn't able to penetrate it in the slightest. While it was clear this restriction was a Devil Dao technique, his divine Devilbane lightning had no effect on it, greatly arousing Han Li's interest. Previously, Han Li had examined various areas of the blood barrier using his bright sight spirit eyes, but he wasn't able to see anything apart from the layer of red. This hadn't flustered Han Li at all, and with the battle occurring on the outside, he still had quite a bit of time to study it. Han Li opened his mouth and spat out a small azure sword. Wielding it with his spiritual sense, he had it transform into a foot-long streak of light and fiercely strike at the barrier. With a muffled bang, the barrier remained unshaken, and his flying sword was flung back by 3 meters. Unsurprised, Han Li withdrew the flying sword and took out a pitch-black item in his hand. It was the magic treasure, the 1,000-fold mountain. He tossed it into the air and formed an incantation gesture with his hands. Black light flashed, revealing a small mountain that was over 30 meters tall. With the point of his finger, the mountain trembled before fiercely striking at the distant wall. With a loud smash, the black and crimson light intertwined, but the mountain was repelled, resulting in only a few light trembles from the barrier. A trace of shock appeared on Han Li's face and he held his chin in hand as he pondered a bit more over the matter. Soon, he pointed to the small mountain once more and had the treasure fly towards the center of the blood barrier. Then with a muttered incantation, the small mountain glowed with black light as it began to rapidly expand. A short moment later, it grew over 200 meters tall and pressed against the top and bottom of the barrier. Without any intention of stopping, Han Li raised his arms and struck the small mountain with several spell seals, causing it to enlarge at even greater speeds. With rumbling swaying, the mountain grew to over 300 meters tall as its entire body shined with black light. It appeared as if it were a huge pillar firmly propping up the crimson barrier. Soon, the mountain began to cause a slight protrusion from the barrier followed by violent swaying. Han Li rejoiced at the sight of this and hastily circulated the spiritual power in his body. As he continued to strike various spell seals at the small mountain, it grew ever so slowly as it deformed the blood barrier before it was blocked from further expanding. Han Li ceased his incantation gestures and stared at the top of the blood barrier with narrowed eyes. It seemed that using the 1,000-fold mountain to break the restrictions wasn't going to work. He would have to try using the celestial ice flames and the purple apex flames to break it. Chapter 772, Battle at the Border, 6. Han Li waved at the huge mountain and it shrunk back to several inches in size in a flash of light before flying back into his sleeve. And in a display of tenacity, the blood barrier shortly returned to its original shape. He turned around and extended his finger. With a crackle, a walnut-sized ball of faint blue flames appeared on his fingertip. Han Li then shouted, "Go!" sending the fireball to strike the distant wall. With a light bang, the blue flames ruptured and formed a blue icy layer that covered the inner layer of the barrier, turning its interior into a world of a severe winter. It had turned so cold that one's breath would turn to frost as soon as they breathed out. Sparkling blue covering the inner layer of the blood barrier, Han Li pressed his hand against it in a blur, striking at the dense layer of ice with azure sword chi. As a result, the ice around his hand shattered into translucent fragments of ice drifting through the air. Han Li's expression grew sullen. The area where he struck at the ice was unscathed and still as crimson as blood. The barrier wasn't truly frozen though. Its surface was merely covered in a layer of frost. Blood chi still roiled at the center of it. Han Li pondered for a moment before sweeping his hand, covering it in purple devil flames. He pressed it directly against the blood barrier. The difference in strength between the celestial ice flames and the purple apex flames were clear to see. As soon as the purple flames touched the wall, the blood mist protruding from the barrier instantly solidified and began to glow with a brilliant purple light. With a smile on his face, he carefully controlled the purple apex flames and concentrated their power on a small portion of the barrier. He then opened his mouth and spat out a bolt of golden lightning, thunder ringing from his mouth. Golden light flashed as the lightning struck the barrier, leaving behind fine cracks. But soon, the barrier violently shook and instantly mended itself. Han Li was dumbstruck. The blood barrier greatly resembled Ghost Dao techniques. It was even capable of restoring itself. It was no wonder why the Mulan was so confident in this restriction. Even the purple apex flames was incapable of damaging it. Truly, the restriction was more than capable of trapping nascent soul cultivators. Although he felt somewhat alarmed, Han Li quickly slapped his storage pouch and took out an azure thumb-sized pearl into his hand. This was one of his newly refined lightning beads. Ever since he had refined it, he hadn't had a chance to test it yet. Having no other way of sensing how the battle was faring on the outside apart from the rolls of thunder, Han Li believed that there should be many obstructions waiting for him as the battle was still in its beginning phase. Additionally, if he were too slow in escaping the barrier, the cultivator army would have already been defeated, leaving him surrounded by the Mulan forces. No matter how exceptional he may be, he wouldn't be able to escape from that. With that in mind, the lightning bead began to glow as he willed the lightning bead to spin in his hand before shooting towards the blood barrier. With a muffled roar of thunder, a head-sized ball of gold azure light struck the ceiling of the barrier, violently shaking the entire dome as a result. A trace of astonishment appeared from Han Li's expression. The might of these lightning beads were far beyond what he had expected. Just as the thought surfaced in his mind, his expression made a sudden chance and azure light brightly shined from his body as he shot through the air. The strike from the lightning bead was able of easily ripping open a small hole in the blood barrier, causing Han Li to fly towards it without another thought. The hole rapidly shrunk, but Han Li was able to escape just in time. He was overjoyed. The lightning bead created from purple flames and azure lantern flames could easily break through such a durable barrier, much to his surprise. Had the lightning bead not worked, his only other options was to use the gold devouring beetles or the blood devil sword. Although there was nothing the gold devouring beetles couldn't consume, devouring the barrier would have taken time. As for the blood devil sword, the consequences of its use wasn't something that Han Li could accept lightly. The nameless lightning bead's ability to deal with the blood barrier came as a pleasant surprise. It seemed the purple apex flames was incapable of breaking the restriction because it was inherently an ice attribute flame, unlike the lantern flames which were a true fire attribute flame. But when Han Li flew out of the barrier, he heard many astonished cries of alarm before he could clearly see what was going on. Followed by that, there were various explosions, rumbles, and furious roars from all around him. Han Li hastily looked at the scene in astonishment. At that moment, he was surrounded by 10 spell warriors. Fortunately, he was able to quickly see that their cultivations wasn't very high. There were 2 core formation spell warriors, with the rest of them being at foundation establishment stage. They were all holding onto formation flags and were about to prepare a spirit technique attack. But when Han Li emerged from the blood barrier, he appeared right in front of them. Han Li ignored them and examined the surroundings instead. He felt his breath turn cold. The area surrounding him, be it sky or ground, were all densely filled with spiritual light and treasure aura, not to mention a rapid succession of explosions far and near. The cultivators and spell warriors from both sides were engaged in a melee, with groups of varying numbers engaging one another. At that moment, Han Li wasn't able to see which side was winning, and he turned his gaze to coldly examine the nearby spell warriors. When these spell warriors saw Han Li emerge from the blood barrier, they were dumbstruck. Not good. He's a nascent soul cultivator. Call for the great sages. One of the core formation cultivators was the first to recover. After he shouted, he slapped the back of his head and spat a green saber towards Han Li before flying away in a streak of green light. When the other spell warriors heard him, they also recovered from their shock. The other core formation cultivator released a fire-red trident and raised his hand, sending a voice transmission talisman through the sky. As for the foundation establishment stage spell warriors, they all raised the formation flags in their hands and began to utter an incantation. Over 10 streaks of light shot out from the tips of the flags and formed a sea of flames burning around Han Li. Yee! Han Li felt greatly surprised that the spell warriors actually took the initiative to tie him down rather than flee. However, a trace of killing intent appeared on his face and azure light twinkled to release several tens of azure bamboo cloudswarm soared from his sleeve. He struck them with a spell seal in a casual wave of his hand and had each of these flying swords lightly tremble before immediately splitting into several copies of themselves, instantly surrounding Han Li in a dense screen of swordlight. The sword QI surrounding him instantly soared with astonishing pressure. When the 2 core formation cultivators saw this, they were greatly alarmed, but they ordered their magic treasures to continue the attack regardless. Han Li coldly smiled and casually flicked 2 of his fingers, sending several streaks of swordlight to block the incoming saber and trident. In a bright flash of azure light, the 2 magic treasures were utterly suppressed by the swordlight and endlessly wailed as their spiritual light shrink. As for the sea of flame that roiled around him, the swordlight surrounding his body dispelled the flames whenever they grew near. Since he didn't have the time to further place with these spell warriors, Han Li had no intention of holding back. With a single command, the 100 streaks of swordlight brightly shined and simultaneously launched towards each of the spell warriors nearby. Although the Foundation Establishment spell warriors raised the formation flags in attempt to block the attack, they were completely shredded without resistance. When the core formation spell warriors saw the swordlight fly towards them, blood drained from their faces. They possessed neither the courage nor recklessness to receive such a powerful attack, and hastily fled in streaks of light. When Han Li saw this, a cold glint appeared in his eyes. He formed an incantation gesture with his hands and 2 swordlights masses of swordlights chased after them. With a series of rings, they bonded together and increased in speed. Just as the 2 Mulan spell warriors flew 50 meters away, swordlight had already enveloped them. Despite their greatest efforts to protect themselves and the various techniques they released, the azure light instantly shattered everything that protected them. Without even scream, the swordlight split their bodies into countless pieces, shattering apart even their primal souls. As Han Li killed them with ease, a violent roar came from up above him. A blinding yellow light soon followed, pouncing towards him at great speed. With a change of expression, Han Li instantly unfolded the thunderstorm wings and disappeared in a flash of silver light. When the silhouette in the yellow light saw this, he couldn't help but slow down and come to a stop, revealing a beardless old man who wore yellow clothes. Although he wore an expression of fury, bewilderment also appeared on his face. He was a Mulan sage who had been battling against a Heavenly South nascent soul cultivator when he suddenly received a voice transmission from a clan member. He immediately disengaged from the fight and quickly flew towards the sender, only to see two of his relatives exterminated by azure swordlight. One of them had even been his succeeding disciple, his own nephew. However, Han Li had quickly disappeared from sight. Alarmed by the sight, he quickly recalled a particularly fearsome Heavenly South cultivator, and he restrained his hatred only to sweep his spiritual sense around him. In the following moment, silver light flashed behind him and Han Li came into existence once more. The old man quickly turned around as soon as he sensed him and raised his hand, releasing a cubic magic treasure towards Han Li. As it flew, it brilliantly glowed in yellow light, instantly turning into a huge brick that was over 40 meters large, carrying a fearful momentum as it screamed through the air. Chapter 773, Battle at the Border, 7. With an expressionless face, Han Li raised his hand, releasing a blue light from his sleeve. In the blink of an eye, it expanded to become a huge shield and received the strike from the huge brick. Bang! Yellow and blue light intertwined as the brick and the shield remained at a standstill. When Han Li saw the shield fall back towards him, he calmly pointed at it, and in a flash of blue light, it came to a sudden stop. Then, the huge brick circled around the shield and smashed towards Han Li. Han Li coldly smiled and disappeared once more in a flash of silver light. The yellow-robed old man was alarmed by this and raised his hand without another thought, summoning a small purple flag into his hand. It quickly transformed into a purple cloud that surrounded his body. In that same moment, the old man heard thunder coming from his left. As soon as Han Li appeared, he opened his mouth and spat a small sword towards the purple cloud. An instant later, a layer of deep blue flame emerged from within it. When the old man saw the blue flames on top of the sword, he lost his composure and wore a face full of terror. His body instantly blurred 3 meters away in an attempt to dodge the sword. But against his complete expectations, a woman suddenly appeared behind him as if she had already anticipated where he would dodge. She raised her hand and released an azure ball that struck at the spell warrior like a bolt of lightning. The woman appeared without a trace, like a ghost. It was as if Han Li coordinated with this woman to perform a precise and incisive strike. Even with such skilled execution, the old man was able to see this coming through his spiritual sense. But at such a short distance, he was unable to dodge. His only choice was to surge the entirety of his magic power into the purple cloud covering his body. He was somewhat confident in the treasure that formed from the transformed purple cloud. A huge explosion sounded out as golden and azure light brilliant flashed. The purple cloud had crumpled in the exchange and the old man within was in a pathetic shape. Half of his body was gone, and the remaining half was engulfed in azure flames. Overwhelmed with disbelief and furious alarm, resentment appeared on the old man's face as he gritted his teeth. With a boom, body combusted, and a blinding streak of yellow light flew through the skies, revealing an inch-large nascent soul with the exact same face as the old man. Seeing the circumstances were far from good, he decisively anticipated to abandon his body and flew out as a nascent soul in a vain attempt to flee. However, Han Li had already anticipated this. Just as the old man's nascent soul attempted to escape, he disappeared in a flash of silver light and blocked the nascent soul's escape path. He waved his hand, summoning a golden net from his hand in a clang of thunder. In that same moment, a small sword covered in blue flames shot out from his sleeve as well. The nascent soul wore a face of terror upon the sight of Han Li, and spat out an inch-large bowl in its panic. The sparkling silver bowl charged forward to meet the oncoming golden net, and before they made contact, the old man's nascent soul caused it to rupture with a spell seal. In a burst of silver light, countless fragments shot at the lightning net, faintly shaking it upon impact. In that short moment of delay, the nascent soul employed an instantaneous movement technique. In a flash of yellow light, the nascent soul disappeared without a trace, only to appear 100 meters away. It then disappeared from sight in a brilliant streak of yellow light. The golden net was a step too late and allowed the prey to escape. Han Li frowned and glanced in the direction the nascent soul had escaped, possessing no intention of chasing it. Such a wise and decisive character is rarely seen. In order to save his life, he actually destroyed his own personal magic treasure. A white-clothed woman suddenly appeared, holding the old man's storage pouch in her hand. Han Li gloomily snorted. A mere stroke of luck. With both the thunderstorm wings and the celestial ice flames, the Mulan spell warrior was as good as him. It seemed killing an off-guard high-grade spell warrior was harder than he thought. Han Li glanced at Silver Moon and said, "Regardless, it seems your movement technique is much more powerful than before. You are even able to conceal yourself a close distance away." Silver Moon smiled. The four-pupiled fox is truly adept at concealment techniques. With my recent advancements, I'll be able to easily attack them, given that Master is occupying their attention. Good. Han Li indifferently nodded. Although Silver Moon was only his tool spirit, she was also the only other person who knew of the secret of his small bottle. But at an unknown time, he faintly felt a veil of mystery shroud her. After a few more words with Silver Moon, Han Li turned his head to examine the battlefield. After further examining it, Han Li was able to see through the chaos. At the greatest heights of the sky, there were 6 late nascent soul cultivators battling. Excluding them, there were 3 sections of the battle. One was the small-scale skirmishes. Cultivators and spell warriors would head out in various sized groups spanning from several tens to even 1,000, and would fight at each other in close quarters. These cultivators and spell warriors were very adept at fighting in their groups. As a result, they were much stronger together than alone. Both sides found it difficult to eliminate one another, and they were stuck at a standstill. Additionally, there were battles where a few individuals fought against a crowd of enemies. These cultivators and spell warriors possessed superior cultivation. These battles were far more dangerous than the group battles. A single mistake could lead to death in both body and soul. Finally, there were those wielding unfathomable techniques and treasures as they stood in confrontation. The most eye-catching of them was a large black mist floating in the air, releasing sharp wails. Any spell warrior that was captured by the mist immediately fell from the sky as a corpse. Whenever it appears, the nearby spell warriors would always fearfully keep their distance. And behind the ghost mist, there would be several fearless spell warriors that continuously struck at the mist with wind and lightning attribute spell techniques and magic treasures. Each strike seemed to scatter a small portion of the mist. However, there were still people continuously waving their flag magic tools within the mist and summoning more mist. This left the Mulan spell warriors without a good plan to deal with it. In another area, there were a dozen nascent soul-grade cultivators that were currently engaged in a battle against a 300-meter tall stone giant. It appeared to be made of ordinary stone, but not only was its figure large, but a few small stones would rain down every time it moved its body. These cultivators didn't dare to receive the giant's attack even under the protection of the spell formations. Additionally, there were several spell warriors standing on top of its head and shoulders. They were assisting the giant with their own magic treasures. There were also a few cultivators and spell warriors that were engaged in a battle using magnificent treasures, each possessing power far beyond ordinary ancient treasures. These sect and tribe protecting treasures have greatly opened Han Li's horizons. Although Han Li emerged from the blood barrier, he remained idle as he observed the nearby fights due to the chaos. He was about a kilometer away from the nearest battles, but even so, 2 Mulan sages emerged from the fray and flew towards Han Li with overbearing momentum. Seeing Han Li ruthlessly dispatch of a similarly ranked spell warrior in an instant, the two had no certainty of victory. However, they couldn't allow this nascent soul cultivator to reign free, or the damage he will cause will be far too great.
Come?
Han Li coldly ordered Silver Moon. He then flew towards a neighboring blood barrier. When Silver Moon saw this, she wore a strange smile as she chased after him. An azure streak of light appeared above the blood-red barrier, and was soon struck by a lightning bead. Afterwards, Han Li disappeared once more in front of another blood barrier. Han Li planned free these other nascent soul cultivators before planning what to do. A huge explosion sounded out, along with a streak of scarlet light flying out from the gap in the blood barrier. With a series of laughter, the freedman said, "I, Shattered Soul, cannot thank you enough for your assistance." The scarlet light disappeared to reveal a grey-robed cultivator. Daoist Shattered Soul. Han Li was slightly surprised to see that this was the first person he rescued. Fellow Daoist, block those two for me while I rescue the others. With a quick thought, Han Li immediately gave him a voice transmission. Yi! So it turned out to be fellow Daoist Han. Your kindness cannot be thanked with words. Please allow me to deal with them. The grey-robed cultivator revealed shock upon seeing Han Li, but he soon agreed. In a streak of white light, he flew over to face the two Mulan sages. When Han Li saw this with his spiritual sense, he inwardly smiled and quickly flew over to another blood barrier. With a wave of his hand, another azure light was released. But at that moment, something unexpected had occurred. The top of the blood barrier flashed with grey light, revealing a large embroidered robed man. He looked at the incoming lightning bead with a solemn expression. Han Li was shocked. How was this person able to conceal himself there without even the slightest trace? When Han Li swept his spiritual sense past this person, he couldn't help but reveal his alarm. Chapter 774, Battle at the Border, 8. With a sweep of his spiritual sense, Han Li found that the large embroidered-robed man actually possessed a late nascent soul cultivation. He was a Mulan divine sage. Wasn't it said that the Mulan only had 3 divine sages? Before Han Li could recover from his shock, the large embroidered-robed man had grabbed the air in the direction of the incoming lightning bead. In Han Li's alarm, he hastily pointed to the lightning bead and had it change direction, but it was too late. A large azure hand suddenly appeared and grabbed onto it with indomitable might, holding it firm in place. Han Li raised his brow and instantly formed an incantation gesture with his hands, detonating the lightning bead's restrictions. Gold and azure light ruptured from within the large hand, scattering both itself and the hand without a trace. The large embroidered-robed man coldly snorted, but with a flicker of azure light, his expression returned to normal. Han Li remained in place, staring at him in silence. The large embroidered-robed man watched him and asked, "Are you Han Li, the cultivator that wields the golden lightning bamboo?" Rather than answer, Han Li asked, "The Mulan should only have 3 divine sages. Who are you?" The large embroidered-robed man said in an indifferent tone, "Good. Since you know that I am a divine sage and you are able to remain calm, it seems you are the one that divine sage Zhong spoke of. My name is Qian Zhong, the 4th Mulan divine sage." The 4th Mulan sage? This is the first time I've ever heard of this. Regardless, that manifested hand of yours seems incapable of restraining that lightning of bead. It seems you haven't entered late nascent soul stage for long, and have yet to consolidate your cultivation. Han Li spoke without restraint as he stared at Qian. In that same moment, he casually pointed to the various sword lights in front of his body, gathering them together to form a sheet of azure light guarding him. "It's true that I've only entered late nascent soul stage for a few years, but do you think you can be a match for me? Your arrogance is quite great." Qian sneered. If he were alone, that'd be the case. "But I am also here." A woman suddenly spoke, and Han Li soon rejoiced. "Who are you?" In the spell warrior's surprise, a stern glint appeared in his eyes. "I didn't expect that after I hadn't seen you for 100 years, fellow Daoist Qian would actually enter late nascent soul stage. You've greatly surprised me. Let's see whether or not your abilities have grown." Soon after this was said, white light flashed to reveal a red-robed beauty floating in the air. She was coldly staring at Qian. When he saw her, his expression stirred. "So it was Lady Feng, but you came here by yourself. Aren't you afraid that something will happen to Long Han? You and your husband have always fought together." "No worries. My husband is being protected by over 1,000 cultivators. Even if you divine sages were to personally attack him, you wouldn't be able to touch him. That's why I came over to test the abilities of the 4th divine sage. Fellow Daoist Han, go ahead and rescue the others." Once this was said, she raised her arm and extended her fingers, summoning a bottle of crystalline flames into her palm. Before she even began to cast her techniques, the bottle was already shining with red light as a raging flame flourished within it. The fire spirit bottle. Qian wore a grave expression. As for Han Li, he flew away in a streak of azure light after hearing her. Qianzhong's expression grew solemn and he tossed a spirit beast pouch into the air. In a flash of rainbow light, the pouch released 2 identical winged beasts. They had an azure eagle's body and tiger heads. Heavenly tigers. Han Li was alarmed by the beast's appearance and couldn't help but shout out their name. It was an extremely rare flying beast located in the Mulan Plains. It was capable of both wind and earth attribute magic techniques and was incredibly difficult to deal with. Although the two of them only possessed late core formation cultivation, they weren't to be underestimated. At that moment, the 2 heavenly tigers roared, unfolding their wings. In a flash of azure light, they disappeared and reappeared near Han Li, glaring at him as if he were their prey. At that moment, the light surrounding his body disappeared and he came to a sudden stop. Instant movement. Han Li inwardly cursed. He had long heard of demon beasts capable of instantaneous movement, but he didn't expect it to be true. It won't be easy to break free of these 2 beasts. Qianzhong didn't stop with the 2 demon beasts. In a blur, he created an identical doppelganger of himself and it began to move as if it were true to life. The only difference was that the doppelganger was completely enveloped in a screen of azure light, and his appearance was brimming with dazzling light as if he were a hollow image. External incarnation. Lady Feng shouted in alarm, a strange expression on her face. It came as no surprise that he was capable of an external incarnation, but she hadn't seen one so strange before. The azure light doppelganger quickly shot towards Han Li without any obstruction from Lady Feng. At that moment, she was fully occupied with Qianzhong. After Qianzhong spat out a sparkling rainbow wheel, he said, "This way, I'll be able to properly test the might of the both of you." With that said, he pointed to the colorful wheel, causing it to fly over to Lady Feng as a rainbow mist. When she saw this, she solemnly struck the fire spirit bottle with a spell seal. The bottle trembled for a moment before red light flourished from within, releasing countless threads of raging flame. These flames appeared completely unordinary and moved as if they were alive. One moment, they were scattered, while in another, they were together. But then, the flames roiled, transforming into several huge crimson snakes before rushing to meet the rainbow light mist. Hearing an explosion nearby, Han Li immediately knew that Qianzhong and Lady Feng have already begun to fight without having to look, not that he could. He was watching the 2 heavenly tigers that were glaring at him as well as the azure doppelganger. He wouldn't be able to free the other cultivators like this. With the 2 famous characters battling behind him, it seemed there would be no further attention spared on this part of the battlefield. Having thought that, he gave several lightning beads to Silver Moon so that she could sneak off to free the other cultivators, but there wasn't any opportunity for that now. He would have to first defeat the 3 opponents in front of him before he could consider other matters. With that thought, Han Li reached for his waist and released his own spirit beast pouch, summoning a large swarm of glistening gold devouring beetles. They formed a large revolving cloud above him. Han Li clutched a hand incantation and disappeared into the beetle swarm. Then with a loud buzz, azure light flashes several times from within, splitting the golden swarm into 3 divisions, each of them rushing towards a different enemy. Gold devouring beetles. If they were fully mature, I might have had something to fear. The azure light doppelganger coldly snorted and spoke with a voice similar to Qianzhong's. As for the 2 heavenly tigers, they spread their wings upon seeing the gold devouring beetles and retreated 70 meters away, revealing an expression of fear. At that moment, the azure doppelganger opened his mouth, releasing 3 bowl-thick beams of light towards each mass of gold devouring beetles. With each beam, the azure light doppelganger turned a fraction darker. It even appeared a few inches shorter as a result. The 3 beams of light extremely quick and accurately struck each of the beetle swarms. With each flash of azure light, a 3-meter-wide sphere of azure light appeared, trapping each of the 3 clouds of beetles. In his alarm, Han Li pointed to the 3 swarms, having them each line the walls of the barrier in an attempt to devour them. But a short moment later, Han Li's expression grew unsightly. The barrier was exceptionally durable, and the gold-devouring beetles were slow in breaking it down. Since the 3 azure light barriers were all made of pure wood attribute spirit chi, it could trap the gold-devouring beetles for quite a while. With the combined abilities of the azure doppelganger's restriction abilities and the heavenly tiger's instantaneous movement, Han Li sensed this battle would be difficult to deal with. Could it be that the fourth divine sage was prepared to deal with him? As Han Li pondered about this, he felt a sense of dread. His guesses weren't far from the truth. When the Mulan's higher echelon had discussed the matter, they had given the task of killing Han Li over to Qianzhong. As a result, Divine Sage Zhu and the others had given him the Heavenly Tiger along with several other treasures capable of restraining Han Li. When the battle started, the Mulan hadn't anticipated that Han Li would join the wagered battles. As such, Divine Sage Qianzhong had tossed the matter to the back of his mind. But when Han Li reappeared, exterminating a group of spell warriors and the body of a sage, Qianzhong immediately noticed Han Li. Regardless of whether he was being blocked from rescuing the other trapped cultivators or being killed to fulfill the yin-sifting sex exchange, Han Li had no choice but to fight. But he also didn't expect that Long Han would risk sending his wife Feng Bing to assist Han Li once he noticed that Han Li broke free. If Han Li truly managed to save the trapped cultivators, the war would shift in the Heavenly South's favor. Seeing that the gold-devouring beetles had yet to make any progress in escaping, Han Li was filled with gloom. Before he could do anything else, the two Heavenly Tigers regained their courage upon seeing the gold-devouring beetles be restrained. In a series of azure flashes, the two spirit beasts disappeared from sight. Han Li coldly smiled in response and flung his sleeve, summoning a blue shield in front of him. At that same moment, he pointed to the swarm of swords in front of him. They surged with sword chi and began to revolve around Han Li, forming an impenetrable barrier. Soon, azure light flashed next to Han Li, revealing the two Heavenly Tigers. They opened their mouths and each spat out a blinding orb of light. Han Li wore a stern expression upon seeing the attack and had his sword lights part into two to meet the incoming orbs of light. Two muffled explosions sounded out as the sword lights easily shattered the orbs of light. Afterwards, they swept their way to the two spirit beasts. When the Heavenly Tigers saw this, cunning shined from their eyes before they teleported a distance away. In his fury, Han Li was about to command the sword light to pursue them, but the azure doppelganger suddenly attacked. Just as Han Li's battle with the doppelganger continued, both Long Han and the shriveled old spell warrior gave the command for their armies to unleash their killing maneuvers. 7 white-haired nascent soul cultivators flew out from behind Long Han with a calm expression, each of them wielding an ancient treasure. As for the spell warriors, a troop of nascent soul spell warriors flew out, the woman surnamed Le amongst their ranks. Under the shriveled old spell warrior's signal, she carefully took out a bronze lantern from her storage pouch and held it in her hand. Chapter 775. The 7 Great Truths Cultivators vs. the Sacred Bird. The woman surnamed Le sent the ancient lantern into the sky and released a trace of white nascent flame from her mouth, lighting the ancient lantern. With both hands forming an incantation gesture in the shape of a lotus flower, she muttered a cryptic incantation, summoning a white lotus beneath her as it slowly blossomed. It was done with such grace that she appeared otherworldly. Her incantation was filled with an indescribably ancient aura. Then, with a tremble from the bronze lantern, mirages suddenly emerged from the lamp, forming 8 identical copies of itself. They then began to revolve around themselves before separating into 3 different circles that slowly circled around each other. The woman surnamed Le flicked her finger, striking each of the ancient lanterns with various spell seals. Azure light brightly shined, causing 9 flames to simultaneously float from the lanterns, and met at the center of them, turning into a head-sized azure flame. The woman then spat out a mist of blood essence at the azure flames. The flames engulfed it, burning all the more brightly and vastly increasing in energy. A short moment later, a clear cry echoed and a foot-long azure bird emerged from the flames. The magnificent peacock appeared graceful with long azure feathers and a pair of jewel-like, fire-red eyes. It arrogantly glanced around and tilted its neck when it saw the woman surnamed Le beneath it. It began to speak to her in an ancient language from the time of antiquity. After deeply saluting at the bird 3 times, she replied to it through voice transmission. The shriveled old man watched this with a grave expression. Spell warrior Le stopped talking in an ancient language and she flipped her hand, taking out a pink, fragrant pearl. When the azure peacock saw this, he revealed an expression of joy and sucked it into its mouth in an azure mist. With a crackle, A halo of light glowed azure peacock and azure flames roiled around it. As a sharp cry screamed through the air, it transformed into a huge bird of flames and unfolded its wings, engulfing 5 kilometers of the sky in fire attribute spiritual chi. The cultivators and spell warriors who used fire attribute techniques suddenly felt their power weaken, much to their alarm. The fire spirit chi in the air began to gather together like rivers to an ocean and poured into the azure bird's body. As a result, it began to expand, causing the azure flames on its body to grow all the brighter. All the cultivators within 5 kilometers stilled their hand and looked at the azure firebird with shock. The nearby temperatures had instantly risen. Even under the protection of magic tools, they felt as if they were beside a furnace. But when the spell warriors saw this, they revealed an expression of joy. It's the sacred bird. Sage La has summoned it. This battle is ours. A few spell warriors shouted out with loud voices. Soon, they began to launch frantic attacks at the cultivators with great excitement. The shriveled old man wore a rare smile upon seeing the might of the sacred bird. When the black-robed woman from the yin-sifting sect saw the azure peacock, a strange expression flickered from her face. She then said, "Only a sacred bird at deity transformation stage is able to control the fire spirits of heaven and earth. It is no wonder it is your most valued weapon. However, your sacred bird may be powerful, but when it emerged it was only at early nascent soul stage. And it was only able to barely ascend to late nascent soul stage after absorbing all that fire spirit chi. That should be a doppelganger of sorts. Else, the Mulan definitely wouldn't have lost so much land against the soaring tribes." After glancing at the black-robed woman, the shriveled old man calmly replied, "Lady Lu is no ordinary character I see. The sacred bird's true body isn't present, but that is only a small matter. Even late nascent soul cultivators are no match against it." The black-robed woman nodded. "That's right. Being able to absorb so much worldly spiritual power is something only deity transformation stage beings can do. But just this ability alone already puts it in an invincible position." The shriveled old man chuckled and didn't reply. As for the 7 white-clothed old men, just as they used their various ancient treasures to strike the spell warriors, they spotted the huge bird within an azure sun and were dumbstruck. The grey-robed old man in charge wore a grim expression and said, "Not good. That demon beast isn't something that ordinary cultivators can withstand. We must block it." Another old man responded with a lively tone, "Then what are we waiting for him? Let's use the 7 treasures of great truths to kill them. That demon bird isn't something from this world. We cannot allow it to cast any spells." Soon after, he transformed into a streak of yellow light and flew straight towards the azure sun. When the others saw him, they immediately followed his lead. As for their leader, the grey-robed old man, he appeared hesitant but followed after them as well after a sigh. When the 7 cultivators approached the azure sun, the Mulan sacred beast had already finished absorbing the fire spirit chi nearby and its body grew to over 80 meters tall. It glanced down at the several cultivators with an entirely hostile expression. With a malicious glint in its eyes, it unfurled its wings and launched a barrage of fist-sized azure fireballs towards the 7. Before the 7 old men could begin their attack, they felt a wave of warm wind. Their bodies were immediately dry, but they felt their hearts tremble. Under the vast barrage azure fireballs, the old man with long eyebrows slapped his storage pouch and flung a crystalline ice net towards the fireballs. In a flash of white light, all of the fireballs had been captured by it. When the long-eyebrowed old man saw this, he smiled, but soon his complexion paled. The ice net ruptured only after a moment, thoroughly dissolved by the azure flames that it held. In that time, the fireballs transformed into a pillar of flame and shot to the men with overbearing momentum. "Go!" The old man in the lead swiftly released his own magic treasures, a milky white ancient mirror. It flew out and circled once before releasing a white barrier that staved back the azure flames. But when the others saw the ice net dissolve, they felt their breaths turn cold. They knew that common magic tools wouldn't prove useful against an azure flame. Quickly use the devil isolating formation. Seal that demon bird. The leading old man shouted. When the other cultivators heard this, they hastily commanded their ancient treasures. A red club, yellow halberd, medallion, small cauldron, jade fan, and a scepter soared into the sky, surrounding the huge bird. Then after a series of clear rings, the ancient mirror transformed into a rainbow, raising a rainbow barrier that not only withstood the azure flames but also trapped the huge bird. When the azure bird saw this, its eyes were filled with fury. It pecked downward, its beak surrounded by a dense layer of azure radiance. An instant later, a tall old man suddenly felt his medallion treasure tremble. With a huge bang, it was struck back and flew straight towards him. In his alarm, he hurriedly struck his medallion with several spell seals in an attempt to stop its momentum, but the medallion only paused for just a moment before ruthlessly continuing onward towards the old man. But just as it was about to strike him, a silhouette suddenly blurred behind him and placed his hands on his shoulders, pouring in a huge amount of spiritual qi into his body. Quickly cast the technique. I'll lend you my strength. The leading old man spoke with a cold voice, rousing the tall old man's spirits. In a single breath, the tall old man cast 5 spell seals and stopped the medallion from coming any closer. The two couldn't help but sigh with relief, having regained control of it. As this occurred, dread filled the hearts of the other old men. They became more vigilant and hurriedly exerted the utmost power of their ancient treasures. Various colored light intertwined and combined together to block the strikes from the huge bird's light-clad beak. Not far away, Spell Warrior La glanced at the scene and turned her head around to look at the ancient lantern. After a moment of hesitation, she remained still. Until the lantern oil fully burned, she needed to guard it and couldn't eliminate the cultivators attacking the sacred bird. Leaving the lantern alone would prove disastrous. The shriveled old spell warrior revealed surprise when he saw the old cultivators tying down the sacred bird, but he didn't seem to pay it any mind. He wasn't worried about the bird deity that they had worshipped with tens of thousands of years. It clearly had the advantage. Regardless of how powerful those 7 magic treasures may be, they aren't any match for the sacred bird. It would definitely be able to strike down the 7 cultivators before the lantern oil was finished burning. These 7 should be the ultimate killers of the heavenly south. With that thought, the shriveled old spell warrior turned his eyes to glance at Long Han, who was standing in front of an army of over 1,000 cultivators with a sullen expression. I didn't expect for the Mulan of being capable of summoning such a powerful demon bird. This will be troublesome. Long Han muttered to himself with a sullen expression. Then with a loud voice, he coldly said, "Quickly, release the spirit phantoms. Take advantage of moments the 7 great truths cultivators are giving us and use them to great effect." Soon after he gave the order, several tens of birds shining with pitch-black light flew out from the cultivator army. Additionally, there were several cultivators who took out a spirit talisman from their storage pouch and slapped it on a statue. In a flash of green light, the spirit talisman merged into the status and the cultivators immediately sat on the ground, motionless. A short moment later, the eyes of the pitch-black phantom birds shined with a chilling blue light, and they extended their claws as much as they could before flying down to the spell warriors below. As for the cultivators who slapped the talismans on the statue, their heads began to roll as if they fell asleep. When the shriveled old man saw this, a trace of mockery appeared on his face. He turned around to the black-robed woman and politely said, "The time has come for your esteemed self to give them the lethal blow. Lady Lu, release your copper-armored corpses. We can seize victory now." Satisfaction appeared on the shriveled old man's face. The black-robed woman's eyes twinkled for a moment before she calmly said, "Brother Zhu, don't be hasty. Let's wait a moment more. A majority of my sect's copper-armored corpses possess foundation establishment cultivation. So long as we wait until the heavenly south cultivators exhausted their strength, the corpses will be able to rout them." After frowning a moment, he hesitated before nodding. Fine. So long as you don't change your mind, we can wait a little bit more." He felt her words felt a bit of reason.